Imagine being 8 months pregnant, swollen with new life, aching with the hope of motherhood, and sitting in a car with the man you thought would be your partner, your protector, the father of your child. Now picture him stopping at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, gently telling you to go use the restroom because it's a long ride ahead. You trust him, you open the door, waddle inside, clutching your belly, and your back aching from the weight of the future inside you. And when you step back out into the pouring rain, he and the car are gone. Not a trace, just silence. The echo of betrayal hanging in the air. That's how this story begins. And it's one of those tales that doesn't just break your heart. It asks you to hold it in your hands and decide what to do with it. Claire was 8 months pregnant, glowing yes, but exhausted, carrying more than just a child. She was carrying disillusionment and unease she couldn't quite explain. Her husband, Ryan Sterling, was a millionaire, polished, powerful, and controlling. Claire had once thought of him as magnetic, the kind of man who seemed to know how the world worked, who made her feel chosen. But over time, that magnetism started to feel like manipulation. Like every compliment came with conditions, and every act of kindness came stamped with ownership. It's a familiar cycle in many high-control relationships. At first, they make you feel like the center of their universe until you realize the orbit has always been about them. Ryan had been distant for months, busy with travel work, vague meetings. The warmth had cooled. The conversations got shorter and the smiles more forced. Claire suspected something was wrong, but denial is a powerful sedative. So when he suggested they go on a weekend getaway, she was surprised, maybe even relieved. A break, maybe a chance to reconnect to soften the edges. But what she didn't know was that this trip would not lead to a cabin retreat or beach resort. It would lead to one of the cruelest betrayals a woman could face. So there she was in a small restroom at a dusty roadside gas station. No signal, no wallet, no phone, because Ryan had offered to hold her bag. And when she stepped outside into the storm, the only thing that greeted her was a text from an unknown number that simply said, "We're done. Take care of yourself." A minute later, a photo appeared on her screen, a selfie of Ryan shirtless, laughing on a beach beside another woman. Claire recognized her. Vanessa, the same woman she had once asked Ryan about, and he had gaslighted her. Said she was paranoid, said she needed rest. And now here was photographic evidence of the truth sitting in her inbox like a grenade. That moment was pure devastation. It wasn't just abandonment, it was erasure. It was being told you were no longer worthy of basic decency, that your role as wife, mother, and partner was disposable, that your pain didn't matter, your unborn child didn't matter. Only his freedom did. Let's pause and bring this into the real world. Every year, hundreds of women are abandoned during pregnancy. According to research published in the Journal of Family Issues, emotional and physical abandonment during pregnancy is one of the most traumatic experiences a woman can face. It increases the risk of prenatal depression, anxiety, and even complications during childbirth. Why? Because pregnancy is already a vulnerable state. Your body is not your own. You're tired, hormonal, and scared. And when the person who promised to stand by you walks away, it shatters not just your heart, but your sense of reality. Back to Claire as she stood in the rain, the contractions started. Light at first like whispers, then stronger like fists. She was too shocked to panic, too numb to scream. She just sat on the curb in the cold rain, clutching her belly and crying. Not just for the baby or the betrayal, but for the girl she used to be before love turned into a weapon. She whispered apologies to her unborn child. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because that's what heartbreak does. It makes you feel guilty for trusting. A few cars passed. One man looked at her and drove on. That's another brutal truth. Sometimes people see you suffering and choose not to stop. But then headlights appeared. A car pulled over and a man in scrubs rushed toward her. His name was Daniel, a doctor on his way home from a shift. He didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. He wrapped her in a blanket, helped her into the back seat, and drove her to the hospital. His voice was calm, his hands steady. He spoke to her like she mattered, like her pain wasn't a burden, but a responsibility. That was the moment Claire's story took a turn. Because while Ryan chose to disappear, Daniel chose to stay. And that choice would change everything. In the sterile white glow of the emergency room, Claire lay on the hospital bed, breathing through pain, both physical and emotional. Her contractions coming in waves, her heart torn in shreds, and a stranger sitting beside her, holding her hand with a gentleness that felt surreal. Daniel, the ER doctor who had found her on the roadside, wasn't just doing his job. He was showing something rare in a world too used to cruelty, compassion without condition. He called the nurses, stayed through the admission, explained everything gently, and never once asked why she was alone. He could tell from the way her hands trembled that the story was layered in wounds and not ready to be told. Real-life heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear wrinkled scrubs and carry a calm voice and a kind heart. Claire gave birth later that night to a beautiful baby boy, his cries piercing the air like the sound of defiance, like he had already decided to fight for joy, despite how he entered the world when the nurse placed the baby in her arms. Claire broke. She cried not just from the pain, but from the overwhelming realization that she was still here, still standing even after being left at her lowest point. The birth of her son wasn't just a moment of motherhood, it was a moment of rebirth for herself. But recovery wasn't easy. Claire had no family nearby, no money and no plan. The hospital discharged her within a few days, and she found herself standing at the entrance with a newborn and nowhere to go. Daniel saw her struggling and made a decision that would shift both their lives. He offered her a place to stay just until she found her footing. Claire hesitated, pride and fear dancing in her eyes, but Daniel didn't pity her. He respected her, and that made all the difference. He gave her the guest room, stocked the fridge, and told her simply, "You and your baby are safe here." That's something so many women in crisis long to hear. Not advice, not judgment, just safety. According to a national housing study, over 50% of women facing domestic abandonment or intimate partner betrayal also face housing insecurity in the weeks that follow. Claire was lucky, not because she was saved, but because someone cared enough to let her save herself. Slowly, carefully, Daniel didn't try to fix her. He simply gave her space to breathe, heal, and rediscover her strength. She spent the first few days in silence recovering breastfeeding, staring at her son, trying to understand how her life had unraveled so quickly. But slowly she began to talk, and Daniel listened. He listened when she told him about the marriage that looked perfect from the outside, but was suffocating on the inside. He listened as she recounted how Ryan would belittle her dreams, how he controlled everything from what she wore to who she called, and how toward the end he stopped touching her with love and only touched her with disdain. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't try to defend Ryan or question her perspective. He simply said, "I believe you," and those three words were more healing than any prescription she had been given. In time, Claire began helping around the house. She folded baby clothes, did dishes, and cooked meals as a thank you. Not because Daniel asked her to, but because giving something back helped her feel useful again. One evening, Daniel found her in the backyard, sketching designs on a pad. When he asked about them, she said quietly, "I used to design baby clothes. I thought I'd launch something small after the baby, but Ryan said it was a waste of time." Daniel smiled and said, "I think the world needs more tiny fashion icons." That night, Claire felt a piece of herself come back. Not the wife, not the victim, but the creator, the woman with ideas and color and ambition. That's the thing about recovery. It doesn't arrive like lightning. It arrives like morning, soft and gradual and full of light. You almost forgot existed. One afternoon, while scrolling through her phone, Claire saw a viral video making the rounds. It was grainy CCTV footage from a roadside gas station. A man helping a very pregnant woman into a taxi and driving off. The caption read, "This man helped an abandoned mother go into labor while another left her in the rain." The comments were explosive. It didn't take long before viewers identified Ryan Sterling as the husband who vanished, and Daniel Carter as the stranger who stepped up. The internet lit up with fury and admiration. Ryan was called every name in the book: monster, coward, disgrace. Daniel was praised as a hero, a real man, a reminder that kindness still exists in a broken world. Claire didn't know what to feel. She hadn't wanted the story to go public. But now that it had, the world was on her side, and Ryan, well, Ryan's fall from grace had just begun. Within a week, Sterling Enterprises lost three major investors. News outlets began covering the scandal. Sponsors dropped him, clients canceled deals, and Vanessa, the woman he left Claire for, posted a story of herself in tears saying, "I didn't know he was that heartless. I'm done too." Karma doesn't always arrive in thunder. Sometimes it comes wrapped in public accountability. As Claire watched the world turn on Ryan, she didn't feel joy, she felt closure, and that is far more powerful. Claire had come a long way from the woman who sat on a rainy curb trembling with heartbreak and labor pains. Now she stood in Daniel's kitchen watching her son giggle at a spoonful of mashed banana and feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity, not complete peace. Not full healing, but clarity that her life belonged to her again. That's the kind of moment that doesn't get applause but should, because reclaiming your life after betrayal is one of the bravest things anyone can do. Daniel continued to be her anchor. Not because he took over, but because he respected her space. He was there when she needed help, but never stepped in like a savior, because that's not what real support looks like. Real support is standing beside, not in front of someone's growth. One morning, Claire told him, "I want to work. I need to be independent. Not for the money for me." And Daniel understood. He helped her update her resume, set up interviews, and even offered to watch the baby when needed. Claire applied for part-time jobs, anything to re-enter the world, not as Ryan's ex, not as a victim, but as a woman with ideas and grit. She landed a remote assistant role for a boutique design agency. The hours were flexible and the pay modest, but for Claire, it felt like climbing Everest in sneakers, and she did it with a newborn in one arm and ambition in the other. In between feedings and deadlines, she sketched baby clothes, quietly building something on the side, something that felt like hers from day one. Daniel saw her working late one night and said half-jokingly, "When are we launching?" This Claire grinned. "I was thinking about calling it Brave Baby." He nodded. "I'd buy it all." That brand name wasn't just clever. It was a statement, a love letter to every mother who fought through heartbreak and chose to rise while rocking a cradle. As her confidence grew, so did her son, healthy, bright, and already babbling, like he had stories to tell. Claire was thriving. Not because someone rescued her, but because someone believed she could rescue herself. That's an important distinction in stories like these, too. Often narratives frame the new man as the savior, but the real hero here was Claire. Daniel was a witness, an ally, not the answer, and that's what makes this story powerful. Meanwhile, Ryan was watching from the sidelines, or rather from the ruins of his former empire. Sterling Enterprises had lost its shine. Investors fled, lawsuits piled up, and he was being investigated for misusing corporate funds to pay for luxury vacations. With Vanessa, who had since vanished without a trace, the internet did not forgive. The footage of him driving away from the gas station had become a cautionary meme. The man who left a pregnant wife and lost everything in return. And while public opinion isn't always just in this case, the outrage felt necessary because sometimes shame becomes the tool that holds people accountable. Ryan reached out once, just once. He sent Claire a long email, filled with excuses, regret, and a poorly worded attempt at an apology. He said things like, "I wasn't in the right state of mind and I thought I was doing what was best for both of us." Claire read it once, then deleted it, not because she wasn't hurt, but because she was no longer controlled by it. She didn't need closure from him because she had already closed that door herself. This is something real survivors understand sometimes. Closure isn't a conversation, it's a decision, a quiet moment when you realize you don't owe your pain a second audience. Instead, Claire chose to pour her energy into Brave Baby. With Daniel's help, she found a small online platform, partnered with local artisans, and began selling her first collection, baby onesies, with powerful affirmations printed across the chest, phrases like, "I come from strength and Mama made me brave." The response was overwhelming, not just from customers, but from other mothers. Women who said, "This isn't just cute, it's healing." Orders poured in, and so did the messages, stories of women who had been left, cheated, silenced, and were now raising beautiful babies with fierce love. Brave Baby became more than a brand. It became a community, a space where motherhood wasn't polished and perfect, but raw, resilient, and real. Daniel and Claire celebrated quietly one night over takeout and laughter. And it was in that moment of ordinary joy that something extraordinary began to take shape, a different kind of love. One that wasn't born out of rescue or need, but respect and time. Daniel looked at her and said, You're the strongest person I've ever met. Claire looked at him and replied, maybe, but it helps when someone sees you that way. That line wasn't romantic, it was truth. A truth that speaks to so many women who wonder if they'll ever be seen for more than their scars. Real-life examples abound of women rising from betrayal and building something bigger. Take Jessica Alba, who after stepping away from Hollywood, co-founded The Honest Company while raising her children, or JK. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter series as a single mother on welfare in cafes in Edinburgh. It's not about fame, it's about choice, about not letting the betrayal be the final chapter Claire had done, just that she was building a life not around pain, but beyond it. And she was doing it while showing her son what strength looked like, not through words, but through action, through quiet tenacity, through the gentle rebellion of choosing happiness again. The months rolled on, like chapters in a book Claire never expected to write yet. Here she was, authoring every page with her own hands and her own choices. Brave Baby blossomed from an online idea into a full-time business. Her apartment became a mini studio, her son's laughter echoing between rolls of fabric, stacks of orders and sticky notes on the wall that read, things like, keep going, or he left. But you stayed, and that's everything. Daniel remained close, not hovering, not controlling. Just present, they had built a rhythm that felt like breath, like the gentle hum of healing. And yet there was still a conversation they hadn't had one night after putting the baby to sleep. Daniel made tea and joined Claire on the couch. She looked at him and said softly, do you ever wonder what this is? He smiled a little and replied, all the time. Claire didn't want to ruin what they had, but silence has weight, and sometimes love unspoken becomes a question mark hanging in the air. Daniel reached for her hand and said, you don't owe me anything, but I need you to know I care about you. Not out of pity, not because I helped, but because you've become my favorite part of every day. Claire blinked, her chest full of complicated joy, because isn't that what so many women fear after being hurt, that the next man will see them as fragile instead of fierce? But Daniel didn't see a damsel. He saw a fighter, and he wanted to walk beside her, not carry her. Claire didn't say, I love you, not yet, but she said, thank you, with a smile and a kiss on his cheek. And that was enough, because some connections need slow soil to bloom. Meanwhile, Ryan reappeared in a way only disgraced men know how desperate and self-righteous he showed up at Claire's pop-up booth at a local baby expo, looking worn and thinner, like life had finally started to discipline him. He saw the Brave Baby sign, saw the line of mothers smiling and buying, and when he caught Claire's eye, he smirked like nothing had changed. Claire froze, but only for a moment. She stepped forward, strong and unshaking. What do you want? Ryan asked if they could talk alone. She said, we can talk right here. Ryan looked around embarrassed, then lowered his voice. I made a mistake. I was scared. I didn't know how to be a father. Claire nodded. You still don't, Ryan scoffed. I lost everything. I thought maybe we could start again. Claire let out a laugh. Not cruel, just clear. You didn't lose everything because of me. You lost everything because you abandoned the wrong person. I survived. I thrived, and you're not invited to this chapter? Her words didn't shout, they sliced. Ryan looked down, muttered something about regret, and walked away. But this time Claire didn't cry. She didn't feel sick. She just exhaled, like closing a book she never wanted to reread. Again, this isn't just fiction. It mirrors real accounts from women who've had to confront their past, not for closure, but for confirmation. Confirmation that they didn't just survive, they grew beyond it. And that is the final act of healing. Not the return of the person who hurt you, but your refusal to let them steal one more second of your power. In the following weeks, Brave Baby received a feature in a parenting magazine. Sales doubled, then tripled. Claire hired her first part-time assistant, another single mom trying to rebuild. Daniel suggested opening a small storefront, a cozy space where mothers could find more than clothes they could find. Encouragement, warmth, and perhaps the same hope Claire had once needed. Claire stood in that space on opening day, holding her son who now toddled beside her as if his feet had always known strength. Daniel stood behind the counter, wearing an apron that said Baby Whisperer. Claire laughed. You're really wearing that. He winked, full commitment. She took a photo of them together, posted it on Brave Baby's page, and captioned it, from rain and betrayal to bricks and baby steps. This is what rebuilding looks like. The comments poured in messages of admiration, stories of survival, reposts from influencers who called her the real inspiration we didn't know we needed. And through it all, Claire remained grounded because her story wasn't about going viral, it was about staying rooted. The final chapter of this journey wasn't a wedding or a proposal. Though those might come later, it was an ordinary evening. Claire Daniel and her son curled up on the couch watching cartoons, her head on his shoulder, their baby asleep across both their laps, and no fear, just breath, just stillness, just peace. And maybe that's the best kind of ending, the kind that doesn't need fireworks or fanfare, just the quiet knowledge that you were left in the rain, but you found your way to the sun. The story didn't end with Claire finding a new man or building a business or silencing the whispers of her past. It ended, or perhaps began, when she stood in her own home with her son giggling in one arm and a box of Brave Baby onesies in the other. Realizing that she had rewritten the narrative that once tried to bury her every step she took away from the pain was actually a step toward herself, toward the version of Claire that had been quietly waiting beneath the surface. Strong, loving, capable, and absolutely unwilling to let betrayal define her. There's a dangerous myth that says a woman's value is tied to who loves her, who chooses her, or who stays. But Claire's journey reveals something far more powerful, that real value is born when a woman chooses herself, when she refuses to let abandonment write the final word. The message of this story is not that women need to be rescued. It's that when given even a sliver of safety and a breath of space, they will rescue themselves and rebuild, stronger than ever. And yes, Daniel was part of her healing journey, but not because he came to fix her, but because he offered something most people forget: to give presence, consistency, respect. He was proof that love after pain is possible, that trust after betrayal isn't a fantasy but a slow, steady path worth walking. But the real transformation was Claire's. She didn't wait for apologies. She didn't wait for the world to agree with her pain. She chose to grow through it, and what we're left with a message to every person watching this who has ever been left broken, lied to, humiliated, or discarded. This is what healing looks like. It's messy, it's nonlinear. It's made of baby steps and deep breaths, and yes, it might involve mashed bananas and late-night tears, but eventually it leads to laughter. Again, it leads to choosing partners, not because you're afraid to be alone, but because they meet you where you already stand strong, whole. And walking forward, take a moment to reflect on what it means to truly reclaim your life. Maybe you've been through something similar, maybe not. But if you've ever felt small because of someone else's choices, let Claire's story remind you that you are not powerless, that being left was never the end. That survival isn't the victory, thriving is. And to the men and women who wonder if their one mistake will follow them forever, remember what happened to Ryan. Not because we revel in his downfall, but because accountability matters. You don't get to walk away from responsibility and expect the world to reward you. And if you're the one who left, make amends, not just in words, but in action. And if the door doesn't reopen, learn from it, grow from it. Don't repeat it, because people aren't disposable, and trust once broken rarely returns the same shape. Brave Baby continued to grow. Claire eventually launched a podcast for single moms called Born in the Storm, sharing stories of hope, resilience, and honest conversations about parenting after betrayal. And one day during a live recording, she said something that stayed with thousands of listeners. She said, "I was left in the rain with nothing, and now I hold everything that matters." And that line became a mantra, a quote printed on shirts, mugs, and eventually a billboard that read, "Sometimes walking away isn't failure. It's the beginning of finally walking home to yourself." And that's the legacy Claire leaves behind. Not just a boutique, not just a beautiful son, not just a good man who stood by her, but a path for others to follow, a blueprint for what it means to choose yourself after someone else decides you're not enough. Because as Claire proved, you were always enough, they just weren't ready for your strength.